Okay, let's just jump right into this. I really want you to picture the scene here because the atmosphere is, well, it's everything for this one.
Oh, absolutely. The setting is crucial.
Right. So it is Wednesday, November 2nd, 1966. We are in Elmira, New York, and it is exactly 9 p.m.
A very specific time, a specific place, and a very specific mood in the room that night.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at Jane Roberts, who, by the way, the source entity, Seth, refers to as Ruburt,
Right, Ruburt.
and her husband, Robert Butts, who is the scribe. Now, usually when we talk about these sessions, especially in the early sessions, we're gearing up for pages and pages of philosophy.
Heavy metaphysics.
Yeah, complex metaphysics, maybe some grand diagrams of the universe or the nature of God. But tonight is entirely different.
It's very different. If you look at the notes from Robert Butts, he sets this stage perfectly. He notes that Jane began the session sitting down. Her eyes are closed.
Right.
But here is the key detail, the one that really changes how we interpret everything that happens next. Robert noticed her yawning at 8:45 p.m.
15 minutes before the session even starts. I mean, she is absolutely wiped out.
She's exhausted. She's yawning. She's feeling heavy. And I think this is so characteristic of her dedication and just the sheer rigor they applied to this work. She completely refused to call off the session.
She wanted to push through.
She wanted to push through, yeah.
And that right there is where things get really interesting for us, because what we're looking at today in this deep dive is session 299 from the early sessions, book 7 of the Seth Material. And frankly, it doesn't read like a lecture at all.
No, it really doesn't.
It feels a lot more like, like a house call.
A house call from another dimension. I think that's the perfect way to frame it.
Yeah. We are going to see a side of Seth here that is surprisingly tender. Almost paternal, really. It's a health check. But it's also this mind-bending look at how our thoughts, and specifically fear, can physically lock up our bodies.
Which is why we're kind of calling this the physics of relaxation.
The physics of relaxation, exactly. And then we're going to look at the envelope object.
Oh, the envoltist, yeah.
Because while Jane is sitting there yawning, supposedly in this state of total exhaustion, her consciousness is doing something that frankly shouldn't be possible.
Right.
We have sketches of a New York Times newspaper.
But not just any newspaper.
No, a newspaper from the future.
4 days in the future, to be precise.
It is so wild. We have sketches of Macy's Election Day sales, specific prices of bed sheets, news about Portugal, all generated on a Wednesday for a paper that wouldn't even hit the stands until Sunday.
It's just a fascinating mix of elements. On one hand, you have this very grounded physiological discussion about relaxation and body chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, you have this high strangeness test of precognition involving coat sales.
Coat sales and orchid mist sheets. I just love it. So our mission today for you listening is to explore this unique perspective on physical recovery, what Seth calls lassitude, and then really dissect this envelope test to see just how incredibly accurate these impressions were.
It's the perfect blend of the mundane and the miraculous, really.
So let's just jump right in. Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Jane is in the chair. Seth comes through. And usually Seth starts with a very formal, good evening.
He does. And the standard response from Rob is usually, good evening, Seth. But look at what happens immediately after the greeting here.
Yeah.
Seth doesn't launch into a dissertation on the nature of time or reality. He looks at Jane, he looks within Jane, and he says, we will indeed give you a rather brief vacation this evening.
A brief vacation. I love that phrasing so much. It's so human. It's disarming.
It really is. It shows a level of consideration that critics of channeled material often overlook. He isn't just using Jane as a microphone or some kind of puppet. He's actively monitoring the instrument. He says Ruburt is completing the final stages of his recovery and is in a state of lassitude.
Lassitude. Now, that is a word you really don't hear every day.
Not at all.
When I hear lassitude, I immediately think of lethargy. I think of being lazy, unmotivated, just lying on the couch doing absolutely nothing. It feels sticky and kind of negative to me.
Well, in our modern society, we definitely view that state negatively. If you aren't constantly productive, something is wrong with you. We've essentially monetized every waking hour.
Oh, totally. Hustle culture.
Exactly. But listen to how Seth completely redefines it. He says, it is a healthy condition of almost complete relaxation.
A healthy condition. That is a total reframe right there.
Yes, it is. He says it signifies the release of his physical system from the mental hold of fear that has made it comparatively rigid up until now.
Whoa. Okay, let's hit the pause button on that for a second. The mental hold of fear, that is a really heavy concept.
It's an incredibly powerful phrase,
Exactly.
and honestly, it's the diagnostic key to this entire session.
Because it implies that the exhaustion Jane was feeling, that yawning, that heaviness before 9 p.m., it wasn't just being tired from working too hard, right? It was the body finally letting go of a grip it had been keeping extremely tight.
Precisely, and this is the core insight of this first segment we're looking at.
Yeah.
Seth is suggesting that fear isn't just some abstract emotion we feel floating around in our heads.
Yeah.
It is a physical mechanic. It creates actual rigidity in the body.
So when we are stressed or anxious or afraid, whether it's about, bills or work or just the chaotic state of the world, we are literally stiffening up our entire physical system.
Up until now, Seth notes, the system had been comparatively rigid, and that rigidity is actively maintained by the mind.
Wow.
So when the mind finally lets go, perhaps through the inner work they've been doing or just the natural cycle of the day ending, the body enters this lassitude. It's not a crash. It's a reset.
It's like when you finally finish a massive project at work, or you get home after a really long, stressful road trip and you just melt into the chair. You literally can't move, and you sit there thinking, oh, I'm being so lazy. I really should be unpacking the car right now. But Seth is saying, no, you're actually healing.
The body is taking over because the mind finally stepped out of the way. Seth uses this incredibly evocative language here, too. He says the rigidity is literally draining away.
Literally draining away. That is such a visceral image. You can almost picture it like a dark fluid just leaving the body, or like a pressure valve has finally been opened.
It connects directly to the idea of emotions as energy or chemical states. If fear creates a certain chemical rigidity, a literal hardening of the biological system, then relaxation must be the flushing out of those chemicals.
And he mentions the timing of it, too. He says the ordinary evening's rest will just about complete his cycle he began this morning.
Right.
So this is a deeply biological cycle. It has a start point and an end point.
It's a predictable, necessary process. And here is where it gets really interesting for anyone interested in physiology or sports recovery even. Seth explains why it feels so intensely heavy. He says the system was too wound up to be allowed sudden, complete relaxation.
Too wound up for sudden relaxation. That feels a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? Wouldn't instant relaxation be the ultimate goal?
Think about the physics of tension for a second.
Yeah.
If you are incredibly tense, if you have been holding that mental hold of fear for a long time, you can't just snap your fingers and drop to zero tension.
Oh,
It would be a massive shock to the system.
It's like, okay, remember those old wind-up clocks?
Oh, yeah.
If you wind the spring super, super tight, you can't just let the key go all at once. It would snap. It would literally break the gears inside. You have to let it unwind slowly.
That is a perfect analogy. Or think of a deep-sea diver coming up from the ocean floor.
Oh, the bends.
Exactly.
Right.
If a diver ascends too quickly, the pressure change can literally kill them.
Right, the nitrogen bubbles form in the blood.
Yes, because the pressure drop is simply too sudden. They have to come up slowly, stage by stage, to acclimatize.
Good.
Seth is describing what is essentially a psychological bends, if you will.
A psychological bends. That is fascinating. So this lassitude, this heavy yawning fatigue Jane is feeling, that is her decompression stop.
Yes, exactly. Seth says, this release, you see, had to come gradually. If the body had let go of all that fear-based rigidity in one single second, it might have caused a systemic failure or some kind of health crisis.
Wow.
So the body, in its innate wisdom, creates this slow-motion drain.
That is actually really comforting, because think about how often we judge ourselves for being slow to recover from things.
All the time.
We think, I should be fine by now. The stressful thing is over. Why am I still so tired? But the body is literally saying, hey, I'm unwinding a really tight spring here. Just give me a minute.
It reframes recovery completely. It isn't a lack of energy at all. It's a massive redistribution of energy toward internal repair. And speaking of energy, Seth gets very specific of the physics of this.
He really does. He starts sounding like a physicist or a biologist here. He says even the electrical charges have changed and his chemical properties.
This is where we see that distinct intersection of metaphysics and biology that makes the Seth material so ahead of its time.
Yeah.
He isn't just talking about bad vibes or negative aura. He is explicitly claiming that the release of fear alters the actual bioelectricity and chemistry of the host.
His chemical properties. That implies that if we took a blood test of Jane in that exact moment, it would look quantifiably different than it did that morning.
Well, we know today that stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline physically change our blood chemistry.
Right.
They change how our nerves fire the electrical charges he mentioned. Seth was describing this exact mechanism in 1966, linking it directly to the mental hold of fear.
And he says all of this is now returning to normal. So the lassitude is quite literally the bridge back to baseline.
Correct. The body is conditioning itself as it returns to normal health and function.
It's a reset button. But you know what I find amazing about this?
What's that?
Despite this total system reboot that's happening, despite her body basically being offline for maintenance, Jane is she's still performing.
That is a crucial observation Seth makes. He says, it should be noted that during this period, he did not fall considerably below his usual performance with me in our sessions.
That's that split consciousness thing we talk about, right? Like her body is basically in the shop for repairs, but her consciousness is still able to clock in and do the high-level work.
It speaks to the incredible resilience of the human instrument. Even when the physical vehicle is heavy with lassitude, the connection to the energy personality to Seth remains totally clear.
Yeah.
In fact, I would argue that the physical relaxation actively helped the psychic connection.
Oh, because the rigidity was gone.
Exactly. There's less resistance in the wire, so to speak. Fear creates noise. Fear creates static in the nervous system. When you drain the fear out, even if you are physically exhausted, the signal is much cleaner.
That makes so much sense. So Seth sees all this. He's diagnosing her electrical charges, her chemical balance, her fatigue, and then he says something that honestly gave me a little chill.
Oh, I think I know the exact line you mean.
A good chill, but definitely a chill. He says, I do peek in at you now and then.
I do peek in at you now and then.
Just imagine that. You're going about your day, maybe washing dishes, maybe yawning because you're tired, maybe watching TV, and this interdimensional entity is just peeking in, checking your voltage.
It really redefines their entire relationship. It's very casual, it's intimate, it's just a friend saying, hey, I'll check on you later. He's actively managing the session schedule based on her physical health.
Right.
And then the session just ends.
Just like that. 9:13 p.m.
13 minutes. An incredibly brief session.
And Jane is, quote, out as usual, eyes both open and closed, described as very dark. That description always gets me. The transition back to normal waking consciousness must be so disorienting.
Especially when you're already in a deep state of lassitude.
Right.
But the brevity of the session was the entire point. The message was the relaxation.
The medium was the message, quite literally.
He kept it short to allow that brief vacation to actually happen.
However, and this is a big wood, however, while the spoken session was short, the actual work didn't stop there. Because this deep dive has a second half.
As it does.
And this is where we need to literally open the envelope.
The envelope objects. This is where the story shifts drastically from a medical diagnosis to a high strangeness mystery.
For those of you listening who might not know about this specific protocol, give us the quick context here. What were these envelope tests? Why were they doing them?
So to test Jane's clairvoyance or telepathy in a strictly controlled way, they would regularly set up these experiments. Often, Rob or a trusted friend would seal an object, a picture, or a document inside a double envelope.
Yep.
Jane would have absolutely no idea what was inside. Then, during a session, or sometimes just in a separate trance state, she would try to describe or sketch what was hidden in that sealed envelope.
It's the classic remote viewing setup. Blind target, absolutely no way to cheat.
Right. And for this specific session 299, we have the results of the 76th envelope object.
76th one, they were really rigorous with us. They did this constantly. This wasn't just some one-off fluke on a Wednesday night.
No, they were incredibly dedicated to proving both to themselves and to outside observers that this wasn't just imagination or guesswork. And the source material provides us with the actual results of this test.
But there is a massive twist with the dates here that we have to address immediately because it's the craziest part.
Yes, the dates. This is the real Twilight Zone aspect of the story. Let's lay it out clearly.
Okay, lay it out.
The session itself takes place on Wednesday, November 2nd, 1966.
Got it. Wednesday night. Jane is exhausted.
The object in the envelope, or rather the target that Jane ends up sketching, is a page from the New York Times.
Okay, a newspaper. Pretty standard Target stuff.
But the date written on Jane's sketch, and the date is the actual printed newspaper itself, is Sunday, November 6th, 1966.
So she is sitting there sketching a newspaper that hasn't even been printed yet.
That is the clear implication. Or, at the very least, that object was a target that existed in the future relative to the exact moment of the session.
Wow.
Whether someone had somehow obtained an advance copy, which is incredibly unlikely for a massive Sunday paper on a Wednesday in Elmira in 1966, or this was pure precognition, the discrepancy is right there in the historical notes.
That is so wild to think about. She's sitting there in her lassitude, right? She's recovering from the mental hold of fear. She's barely able to keep her eyes open, and her mind is casually drifting 4 days into the future to read the Sunday paper.
And not just scanning the major headlines either. This is what I love most about this specific case. We aren't talking about her predicting war declared or president speaks.
No.
We are talking about, well, shopping.
This is literally my favorite part. Let's look at image 1 from the source clippings. This is labeled the rough front copy. Describe what we are seeing here for the listener.
It's a pencil sketch. It's quite rough, a bit chaotic, lots of scribbles and lines. But the text she has written down is incredibly specific. Right at the top, she writes, Macy's Election Day sales.
Macy's Election Day sales. Now, Election Day is in November, so okay, that tracks. A skeptic might say, well, she knew it was November. She could logically guess there would be an Election Day sale.
Sure, that's a completely fair point. But then she draws these figures. 3 standing figures. They look exactly like fashion sketches.
Yeah, they look like models wearing long winter coats.
Exactly. And she writes out a caption. Look at these exciting new coat silhouettes.
Look at these exciting new coat silhouettes. That sounds exactly like ad copy. That is not how a normal person speaks to a ghost.
It really does. It captures the exact tone of 60s advertising perfectly. And then look at the prices she jotted down. She writes $63.99.
Yeah.
And $139.
Those are very specific numbers, not about $50 or over $100. $63.99.
And she even notes, start Monday in all stores.
So she's picking up the actual logistics of the sale, not just the vibe, the literal business operations.
But look over to the left of the ad sketch. She has sketched a column of text, the news column.
Oh, I see it. It says Portugal shows decline.
And right below that, iBank and Salon.
iBank and Ceylon. That is so incredibly random.
It's the randomness that makes it so compelling as evidence. If you were just guessing what's in a newspaper, you'd guess Vietnam or Johnson or the economy.
Right, the big stuff.
You wouldn't guess iBank and Salon.
Unless you were actually seeing it. Unless you were looking at the physical page with your inner eye.
Or perceiving the informational idea of the page, it heavily suggests she wasn't guessing. She was receiving. It's the profound difference between imagination and actual psychic reception.
It's the specific versus the general. The skeptic would say, oh, she guessed there would be ads in a paper. Sure, fine. But did she guess the iBank in Ceylon? Did she guess the price of the coats down to the exact penny?
Precisely. And let's flip to the back. Image 2, the back copy.
Okay, turning the page. What do we have over here?
More sales. This time she writes, Monday and Tuesday, A and S election day values.
A&S, that was Abraham and Strauss, right? Another really big department store back in the day.
Yes, it was. And what is on sale this time?
It looks like a stack of folded things, like maybe towels or bed sheets.
She labels it explicitly huge sheet scoop.
Huge sheet scoop. I just love that 60s copywriting. Scoop.
And again, we get the crazy details. She lists the available colors. Blue, pastel blue, lime green, orchid mist, aqua blue, yellow.
Orchid mist. Come on, you cannot make that up. You don't just sit in a chair and guess orchid mist.
And the price for these sheets?
Sale. $2.95 each.
$2.95 for a sheet. Those really were the days.
Seriously. I will take 10 in orchid mist right now, please. But again, the precision of it all. $2.95, not $3 flat.
But look at the news fragment she caught on this side. Top left corner. Dominican Priest Build Seminary.
Dominican Priest Build Seminary. Again, tiny, hyper-specific news. Not world-shattering events, but completely verifiable.
And there's even a small note about funds raised.
So, putting this all together for a second, Jane is in a deep trance. She is physically drained. Seth literally just diagnosed her as recovering from fear.
Right.
And simultaneously, she is pulling specific data points, exact prices, weird colors, obscure international news headlines from a newspaper 4 days in the future.
It really challenges our baseline understanding of consciousness. We always think of the mind as being locked inside the brain.
Time to the skull.
Exactly. But if the mind can read a Sunday newspaper that hasn't been published yet, while the brain is in a state of near-sleep lassitude on a Wednesday, where's the mind, really?
It's almost like the lassitude actually helped. Like, because she was so incredibly relaxed, because the mental hold of fear was totally gone, she could drift further out.
There is a very strong possibility. Seth talks quite often about how the ego, the conscious, daily worrying self, can aggressively block these deeper perceptions.
Because the ego wants to control everything.
Right. The ego wants to analyze. Fear creates rigidity.
Rigidity blocks the signal.
Exactly. When the fear is gone, when the rigidity physically drains away from the nervous system, the system becomes porous. It becomes open. And suddenly, orchid mist sheets from next Sunday just filter right through.
Man, it really makes you wonder. We spend so much time trying to force insight, don't we? We try to focus, to concentrate really hard on solving a problem, but maybe the key is this healthy lassitude.
The brief vacation.
Yeah, maybe we all need to take more brief vacations.
Mm.
If we stop trying so desperately hard to see the future or figure everything out, maybe the answers would just show up.
It connects right back to Seth's comment about the electrical charges. If the receiver is jammed with the static of everyday fear, you get nothing but noise.
Right.
Clear the static, change the chemistry through relaxation, and the signal comes in perfectly clear.
It's fascinating to me that Seth didn't really comment on the envelope object in the session text itself. He was completely focused on the health check.
True. The session text focuses entirely on the state of the instrument. The sketches are just the result of the instrument's capability once it's cleared.
Right.
Seth didn't need to brag about the prediction or validate it. He just needed to make sure Jane was okay to keep doing the work. He prioritized the worker over the work itself.
Priorities, right.
Priorities, absolutely.
So, looking at these sketches again, I'm just struck by the contrast of it all. We have this profound reality-breaking psychic phenomenon, and it is literally being used to look at Macy's ads.
There is a definite humor in that, absolutely. But it's also incredibly grounding. It suggests that the psychic world isn't separate from the physical world.
Right, it's not all floating in the clouds.
Not all angels and trumpets and burning bushes. It's also bed sheets and winter coats. It is the very fabric of daily life.
And maybe that's exactly why it was such a good test. It's totally objective. The price of the coat is either $63.99 or it isn't. You can't argue with it.
Correct. It is 100% verifiable.
Mm-hmm.
iBank in Salon is verifiable.
Ah.
It completely removes the ambiguity of poetic or symbolic interpretation.
I want to circle back to one thing Seth said earlier, though. The mental hold of fear. We talked about it at the beginning, but looking at the whole picture now, the physiology, the future sight, do you think that's the main takeaway here?
I really do. Think about it. In a world of constant information overload, and that was even true in 1966, let alone today, we're constantly tightening up.
Yeah, we hold our breath.
We brace for impact.
Mm-hmm.
And Seth is telling us that this bracing is not just unpleasant emotionally, it is physically damaging.
It alters our chemistry.
It blocks our flow. It literally changes our electrical charge.
And the cure isn't always doing something about it. Sometimes the cure is just lassitude.
Letting it drain away. Respecting the biological cycle of recovery. Understanding that if you have been wound up tight, you cannot just snap back to normal. You have to ride the wave down.
And knowing that even when you are riding that wave down, you aren't useless. Jane was still performing. She was still connecting across time and space. She was still brilliant.
She was still incredibly effective, perhaps even more so because she wasn't fighting the relaxation.
It's a lesson in trust, really. Trusting the body to handle the reset automatically.
On trusting that you are supported through it.
Mm.
I do peek in at you now and then. You aren't doing it alone.
That is such a nice thought to hold on to. Whether you believe in a spirit guide named Seth or you just believe in the deeper wisdom of your own subconscious mind, there is a part of you peeking in, making sure you don't ascend too fast and get the bends.
Beautifully said.
So what does this mean for you, the listener, the person driving to work right now, or washing dishes, or maybe feeling a little lassitude themselves today?
I think the practical application is this. Listen to the fatigue. Don't fight it. If you feel that heavy, yawning exhaustion, don't instantly label it as laziness.
Right, reframe it.
Label it as processing. Label it as the necessary draining of rigidity.
Give yourself permission for the brief vacation.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, when you are in that deeply relaxed state, pay close attention to the random thoughts that pop into your head.
Yeah. If you suddenly think of orchid mist sheets, check the Sunday paper.
You never know.
You never know. It could be an iBank in Ceylon.
It's a profound reminder that our potential is vast, but it strictly requires a well-maintained vehicle. The physics of relaxation are just as important as the physics of work.
The physics of relaxation. I really like that as a title.
It fits perfectly.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground in a very short session today. From the yawning fatigue of a medium in upstate New York in 1966, all the way to the specific price of winter coats in the future.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And I think it is important to remember that this is just one single session, session 299. There are hundreds of these.
Thousands of pages, actually. The early sessions are an absolute treasure trove of these day-to-day moments that really humanize the entire phenomena.
And speaking of the source, we definitely need to give credit where credit is due. This material comes directly from the Seth Material, specifically the early sessions, Book 7, recorded on November 2nd, 1966.
Published by the New Awareness Network. They have done an incredible job preserving these records and making them available to the public.
If you are listening to this and you're thinking, I want to read the actual words, I want to see the sketches and diagrams, I want to go deeper, you absolutely should.
We are just scratching the surface here today. The depth of insight in the original books is unparalleled.
You can find them at sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions. Go there, buy the books, support the work. It is totally worth it.
Absolutely. It's a direct investment in your own understanding of consciousness.
And just a quick reminder, this deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to learn, to share, and to explore.
And to relax.
And to relax. Whatever you do, don't forget the lassitude.
Never forget the lassitude.
Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought, a provocative little nugget to chew on for the rest of your day.
Let's hear it.
So, Seth told Jane that her fear had created a chemical rigidity that he could literally see draining away. He could actually see her electrical charges changing in real time. So if our thoughts are acting like chemical factories in our bodies every single second of every single day, and if an entity like Seth can just peek in and see that architecture, what are we building right now?
That is the ultimate question.
What exact sculpture are you making out of your own nervous system in this very moment? Are you building a rigid fortress of fear, or are you building an open conductor for something new?
Are you winding the spring tighter, or are you letting it unwind?
Exactly. Something to really think about the next time you catch yourself yawning. Maybe it's not just a lack of sleep. Maybe it's freedom.
Beautifully put.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you in the next session.
Be well.
And seriously, watch out for those coat sales.